Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Light Sports Ramble. As always, my pleasure to come to you from my vehicle and talk sports. Also want to give a shout out to my endorsement with Fantasy World Order. For all my listeners that are into fantasy football, this is a great website to go check out. Or if you're just into sports, go and check some of the stuff out on this website at fwo365.com. It's an awesome site. It's not just for fantasy. There's other things in there that are very interesting. But as we move along today, the topic eventually will be fantasy tight ends. But so much happened in the world of sports since last night. Baseball trade deadline, Jake Peavy going to the Red Sox. I could have rambled about that. Could have rambled about the NFL Pro Bowl and the format change, and I will. I think next week I'm actually going to do a ramble on my opinion of the new format. And I don't want to do it tonight because I just don't have all the information. I just got the nuts and bolts that there's going to be kind of like a kickball selection going on. My team, your team. It sounds kind of cool, actually. And then the despicable news of the day, and that's Riley Cooper and his comment. And I'm not going to get into it if you don't know what I'm talking about. I had no need to go watch the video. I heard what happened. There is no place for that kind of language anytime, anywhere. And I watched his apology and his press conference, and I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. People say in times of distress your true colors come out, and Riley Cooper, the word came out, and so that's how I'm going to look at it. So, moving on to something a little more fun to talk about. Fantasy tight ends. You know, and at one time, the tight end position was kind of like, who am I going to throw in here? Now, having a valuable tight end in your fantasy league can really propel you to win some games. And so, like yesterday, I went on to ESPN, pulled the list up. I'm not going to go over all of it. I'm going to go through the top 10. And I think it's pretty consistent. But I think the biggest question that we have at tight end this year is how healthy is Gronkowski going to be? And where should we draft him? I mean, that could be a big if you take him early as your number one tight end. Because nobody knows about his health. All signs are going to point to a return. But man, for me personally, when I draft, unless it's a later round, I think I'm staying away from Gronk this year. Just not sure about the injury. But again, that's me personally. Number one on that ESPN list, of course, Jimmy Graham. And he's going to get his catches, he's going to get his yards, going to get his touchdowns. Drew Brees loves Jimmy Graham. So if you got a chance to take Jimmy Graham, if he's on your board and you need a tight end, and you want to be that first drafter to take him, go ahead. He's fully worth it. Third was Tony Gonzalez, and I don't agree with him being so high. I think I'd drop him down a little bit. Still keep him in the top 10. I still think he's a starting tight end. But I think with the addition of Steven Jackson to open the game up a little bit more, I think you're going to see a different offense. And let's face it, Gonzalez is getting old. He almost retired last year. I just see a little bit of drop in his production. Even though Ryan will target him, I'm just not so sure that I would take him that high as the third best tight end. I'd actually flip Witten up into that third spot because that is Aikman's security blanket right there. And it's very obvious. Witten has a ton of receptions, a ton of yards. I mean, that's a good, solid starting tight end on your team if you can get Witten. And then Vernon Davis coming in at 5. And I'm a little torn on this. Because if you go by stats from last year, you're going to say, well, he didn't have a great year. But when him and Kaepernick found the connection in the playoffs, Davis was lighting it up. And then you hear about him working with the wide receivers in training camp. Wow. Maybe he's going to have one of those killer tight end years. So, it's one of those things. Do you keep him at 5 or do you move him up? I'm personally thinking I might take a chance on this guy. Some more time with Kaepernick and they're working him at wide receiver. There's no cornerback in the league that can cover Vernon Davis. I disagree with Rudolph being number 6 on the list. I would move Rudolph down and maybe even out of the top 10. Because it's just that offense. That's Adrian Peterson running the ball, and I don't think Ponder's the quarterback. He may get receptions, but is he going to get you a ton of yards? He's a good tight end. But I definitely wouldn't reach in an early round for him. And then you get the same thing kind of with Owen Daniels in Houston. The guy's going to get catches and some yards in between the 20s, but his TD total went down last year. And that's because Houston likes to pound the ball with Foster once they get inside the 10-yard line. So I'm thinking those two, Rudolph and Daniels, I might move down just a little bit. I think Olsen from Carolina is going to have another good year because Cam Newton doesn't have a lot of other weapons. And that's just going to be a constant. So I think he's a solid starting tight end for you. And then Gates from San Diego is number 9. And everything I'm reading and everybody's saying he's on the downside of his career. Phillip Rivers is getting older. And this guy is not worth a high pick and maybe not even a starting tight end. I'm going to tell you what. I think what we found is that there's just a lot of melancholy going around San Diego. And I even said it in my ramble. They're just kind of there. And I think McCoy coming in is going to give them a little bit of spark. And so, I don't know how I would draft Gates. If he's available when I draft, and I'm not sure where I would draft him. But there's something that's telling me that McCoy's going to rejuvenate that offense and get Gates involved again. Because I still think he has it. I still think he can put up some good numbers. And so I think I might move him up a little bit on my chart. I wouldn't have him at 9. And then we got Myers from New York rounding out the top 10. Yeah, that's a good place for him. Solid tight end. You know, he's going to be mixed in. You don't know what the running game is going to do, but you got some great receivers there. So not quite sure what the production is going to be. But with that said, I think there are 6 other people that you want to take a look at that didn't crack the top 10 that I think could be good picks for tight ends. The first is Bennett from Chicago. Trestman's coming in. You know, and as much as I said in the ramble that I'm not quite sure what he's going to bring to Chicago, we all know he's an offensive mind. He's been an offensive coordinator for how long? I see Bennett getting very involved in this new offense. And listening to Training Camp Live, and listening to Brandon Marshall talk about the distribution of the ball, it seems like Jay Cutler's moving the ball around. And if that's the case, I think Bennett is going to have a very, very good year. Something to think about when you're looking at drafting a tight end. The other is Jermichael Finley from Green Bay. And why I say this, yeah, last year, he laid an egg last year in my mind. Nowhere near what he could do. But I think he's going to come back strong this year. I think the running game's going to help. It's going to allow them to open up that seam down the middle where he really thrives. I'm thinking Finley is going to have another good year. Plus, they always say it takes 2 years to fully recover from an injury. And it's that year. And the reports are that he came in good shape, a little bit thinner, looking good. So he's one of my guys that I think could have a very productive year. And now, this is a reach. But if you think about it logically, Dixon from Baltimore. Pitta is down. There's no wide receivers. Where are they going to distribute the ball? It's got to go somewhere. Now, I don't know how they're going to use Dixon, but he could really have a good year at tight end based on the situations that have happened in Baltimore. So again, something to think about when you're looking down that list of available tight ends. And then I think Dustin Keller in Miami. You brought in the deep threat of Wallace. And you've got Philbin coming from the West Coast offense. He likes the tight end. Likes to use formations in the tight end. They signed Dustin Keller for a reason. So I think he's one of my sleeper picks there at tight end. Now, can Tannehill get him the ball in the right situation, get him some catches and yards? That remains to be seen. But I think he's going to be targeted. And I said this in the Ramble, and I like this with Arians going to Arizona. And that is Hausler at tight end. Now, this is a risky pick, folks. Really risky, because he's not proven. But you got to look at Arians' background. On offense, he utilizes the tight end, and Hausler is going to be the starter. So, when you look at it, he's going to get his targets. Now, how productive will he be? That's where the concern is, because we don't know. But if you're going to go for 2 tight ends and you're going to draft a second tight end in your league and Hausler is there and you're good everywhere else, this is somebody to look at. And in a similar situation as Ertz in Philadelphia. They drafted him, and this guy can go down the seam and he can spread the field down the middle. And I think Chip Kelly's going to like that. But you do have Selleck. And so we don't know where the battle is going to be at tight end. So depending on when your draft is, you're not quite sure who the starter is going to be. But I think Ertz could be a good second pick, because if he eventually gets into the starting lineup, you're going to have yourself a good tight end. But again, that's one of those risky picks. But with that said, folks, that is the Red Light Sports Ramble for tonight. Again, I got to give a shout out to my fellow endorsement with Fantasy World Order, FWO365.com. Go check the website out, folks. I'll see you at the next red light. My pleasure as always.